Our dear Heavenly Father, as we meet together as members and officers of Fylde Borough Council this evening, we pray that those who are charged with decision-making for the future of the borough might be able to make those decisions clearly, might be able to be moved by a spirit of benevolence and concern for the inhabitants of the borough. We pray, Heavenly Father, that the discussions this evening might be conducted in a spirit of civilness and a spirit of friendliness, and that the outcomes that are decided upon might be those which are best for the future of the borough of Fylde as we go forward. And we say these things in the name of thy Son, Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Is it on? Thank you. Thank you. Pleased to welcome you all to this friendly meeting. Let's hope it stays that way. Thank you. Do any members have any personal or prejudicial interests to declare at our meeting tonight? No? Thank you. Item 2, I'd like to propose from the Chair that the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 27th of January 2014 be confirmed as a correct record. The Deputy will second that.
Yes, no. Sorry, I'm happy to second those, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving swiftly on. Mayor's announcements, apart from another appeal to anybody that's got some free time on Saturday the March the 8th for the Mayor's Ball. I would welcome any or all of you. I'm trying not to sound desperate, but it would be nice to see people there if they can make it. And I'll reserve any other announcements for next week's meeting. Chief Executive, do you have any announcements?
Only one communication, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Ian Curtis for his 30 seconds notice. He did a good job.
He did a good job, thank you. Okay. Agenda item 5, the pay policy statement for 2014-15. I'd like to invite Councillor Karen Buckley to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The pay policy came forward to the last council meeting, as members will recall, where it was deferred in order that the scrutiny committee could have a look at it. They did that last week, and therefore the pay policy statement is back before council for approval, and I ask members to approve it, subject to 2 further recommendations from scrutiny, which I will read out to you. So this is the amendment that council approve the pay policy statement with these 2 amendments. Number 1, the figure of £56,880 stated in the policy statement as the threshold at which full disclosure of the responsibilities and payments for any employee will be made is changed to £50,000, in line with the figure recommended by the Code of Best Practice for Local Authorities on Data Transparency. And number 2, this is a clarification. The policy statement covers the full disclosure of the responsibilities and payments of any employee that works reduced hours and is paid below the £50,000 threshold, but pro rata to a full working week would be paid in excess of the £50,000 threshold. So those are the 2 recommendations that came forward from scrutiny. I put before council and asked that council approve the statement tonight, and I have a seconder, the leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I stand to second that recommendation.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak on this item? No? Okay, all those in favour then of this item? Anyone against? I think that's That's unanimous. Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 6, governance arrangements. I'd like to invite Councillor David Eaves to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This special council meeting has been convened as Fylde Council has received a petition calling for it to adopt a committee system instead of the current arrangements with a leader and cabinet. This will result in a referendum which will be held on the 22nd of May this year. This special council meeting and the referendum has been forced on this council, having been instigated by an external body, not the elected councillors of this borough, which will inflict further administration costs in excess of £54,000 on the council taxpayers of this borough. I feel I should stress that Fylde is the only district in the whole of the country where a referendum aimed at changing the system of council governance has been organised from outside the elected body. Due to this petition, the council is now required by law to draw up a model for the operation of a committee system in the event of the referendum votes being in favour. The suggested broad principles are set out within your order papers this evening. The Conservative administration of this council are opposed to any change from the cabinet system and will campaign rigorously to maintain the current arrangements and demonstrate to our residents the huge steps forward that Fylde Council has achieved under that system of governance, both in our very healthy financial balances and our continued provision of high quality services whilst not increasing council tax for 4 years. Mr. Mayor, I find myself in something of a political dilemma. Whilst not supporting a change in the system currently operated so successfully within this council, in the spirit of cooperation, having been forced into this referendum, I move the item before council this evening, and I do have a seconder.
Thank you. Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second the resolution, but I'd like to reserve the right to speak till later in the debate.
Thank you. Right. Would anybody like to speak on this item? Councillor Armitt.
I'd like to just reiterate also what Councillor Eaves said there. I'm very disappointed to be here tonight. The cost of being here tonight, the time of being here tonight. I'm disappointed in the hours we've put into getting here tonight as well. I think it's a bad day for the people of Fylde, it's a bad day for democracy, and it's a bad day for Fylde Council. We had an election a couple of years ago, and the people voted who they wanted to lead the council. And at no time during that election was the method of running the council mentioned. Why wasn't it mentioned during that campaigning? Because the system we have works. It's been proven to work. It works well for the people of the Fylde. It also works well for people of Great Britain and for most countries around Europe as well. We have a cabinet system. It's called democracy, first past the post democracy, and the UK likes it. Do you not think Labour at Westminster under Cameron, having lost to Cameron, do you not think they would have liked to have said, look, we lost, but that's okay. We're going to throw our toys out the pram now. We want to be involved in all the meetings. We want to run everything. We don't like having lost. That's not what we like. We want to change the way Britain's been run. We don't like this as a system. It's like a petulant schoolboy that doesn't like his own way and throws his toys out until his parents give in to him. So now we are bullied into doing this referendum. We are forced by a tiny percentage of our population to look at forcing the taxpayers across the whole of the Fylde to take on £54,000 as a minimum start point to change something that we don't need to change, to flatter someone's ego. And afterward, what changes really? What changes? Whoever wins the election will control the committees. So we get more talking, more time taken up, and the results stay the same. There's 420 plus councils in Great Britain, and less than 10 have made this change. So less than 2% have thought of changing back. 98% think that what we've got works. We've had a lot of talk recently about the local plan steering group. There could not be a better vision of your future. We've heard how lots of people don't like it. They've been given a chance to talk, but they don't have any influence. Welcome to the future. That sounds like a committee system to me then. This should have been a campaign point. It should have waited 12 months more. We should not be spending £54,000 at a time of austerity and in time of cuts. When people say to us in the newspapers, why is the Moss Road shut? Why is it not being fixed? Where does all the money go? Well, stunts like this should be considered when people are asking those questions, and we've got this money to throw around. Oh, I don't blame it all on local activity. I blame a lot of it on Westminster. Because what happens next when we get the next 4,000 signatures? Do we have a referendum on dog poo? Is that the next one? Why not? Where does the madness end? What do we do with all of this? And we currently have a system that's efficient, effective, and shows no increase in council tax, shows huge customer satisfaction, it works. Why on earth would someone want to change that? And such whilst tonight and all its costs are forced upon me, and we're forced to be here by law to agree a potential framework to something that we may have to vote, that we have to vote upon, I will be abstaining in the vote because there's no way I can support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armitt. Councillor Mulholland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was hoping I wasn't going to need to speak tonight, and I didn't intend to speak tonight, but after listening to Councillor Armitt, I can't help myself. He's slagging off the idea of a public petition and a referendum for some reason has been undemocratic, while he thinks the cabinet is democratic. I'm completely lost on that idea. I understand the councillor, he's the leader of the council, not being happy, and I think in a lot of ways, particularly on the finances, I think the cabinet have done a good job. However, if anybody is trying to tell me that this is a democratic system, they must be dreaming. What's even worse is that when a cabinet member makes a decision, that decision then becomes a decision of the council and cannot be challenged by the council. And I have to say, when I led the scrutiny on Melton Grove, that was one of the aspects that I found absolutely horrendous. Didn't matter what it was, the whole body of the members of the councillors, all the other councillors, had a completely non-executive role. We couldn't make a decision. The council meant Councillor Fylde or Councillor whoever. Any cabinet leader making a decision, that was a decision of the council. I'm sorry, but I think that's just fundamentally wrong. When I was first elected, I think there were 49 councillors, and in my fairyland, I thought that the idea of Fylde Borough Council was that 49 people, okay, break that down into committees, so maybe less, but, 49, 26 people, whatever, intelligent people, elected people, would get in a room, discuss items of relative importance, and come to a consensus. And I used to think, well, what a good idea that would be. You get that input from a variety of people, and hopefully you will arrive at a reasonable decision. You're not going to get that with one person, I'm sorry. It just doesn't happen. And again, I understand the complaining about the costs of this referendum, but it needn't have been like this. There were a lot of requests to discuss the system that we were using. There were a lot of people that weren't happy with the cabinet system, and that's not just from the opposition. I think there were members of the Conservatives who come out and said that they didn't believe it was very democratic, and it was up for discussion, but it was kicked into the long grass, or whether I'm not privy to whether the Conservative group in caucus had a vote and kicked it out. I don't know. But, it could have been done a different way, and I feel it should have been done a different way. I don't believe the system we've got now is democratic, and I can't wait to get back to a committee system. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mulholland. Councillor Silverwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think one of the disadvantages of sitting up here is that we have to behave in an impartial manner. So therefore, I'd love to be able to have the freedom that Councillor Mulholland has just had. One comment I will make is this petition by the residents is they're asking for transparency and they're asking for democracy. They have every right to ask for that. They also have every right for the residents that they the councillors that they vote for. Those councillors represent them, and this is what they don't see when we have a cabinet. What I would like to do is ask a question of our chief exec, if I may. I'd like to know what impartial information is this council going to send out to our residents and our town and parish councils, explaining to them in an impartial way and giving them information on this referendum. I'd also like to know what consultation will take place with the town and parish councils. If anyone says, well, this is going to be another cost imposed upon the council, I mean, an obvious way is the saving that it would go out with our council tax bills. Thank you. Thank you, Alan, if you can answer that, please.
Thank you. Do you want, if you can?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've already had a similar question posed, so hopefully I can answer it. We don't have a budget set aside to promote a referendum or produce leaflets or market, the actual event. We will publish information on our website. We will remain impartial. The officers only implement the system that the full council decides. So any information will remain impartial, will not support either a committee system or a cabinet system. In terms of consultation, if the referendum returns a yes vote in favour of a change of governance, then we will undergo a consultation exercise with all the appropriate organisations. We don't intend to have a consultation exercise in advance of May the 22nd.
Thank you. Councillor Hayhurst.
Mr. Mayor, like Councillor Mulholland, I had no intention of speaking tonight, but again, Councillor Almond has basically got me on my feet. It's so sad, isn't it, with Councillor Almond? He's been on the council now for about 6 years. And 2 years, 2 years. But even now, he doesn't realise that the Moss Road is nothing to do with Farnborough Council. It is County Council. And this is one of the arguments for having, going back to a committee system. Because all 51 councillors used to be involved in the decision-making process previously. 51 councillors knew what was going on. 51 councillors got all the information at the same time. And 51 councillors worked for the good of this borough, not just 7 as we have with the cabinet. And we had 51 that were informed about the situation. And that's the problem, isn't it? Talking about the Moss Road not being mended by Farnborough Council, well, that demonstrates really what that bench councillors are like here. They haven't got a clue what's going on. I've worked on both systems, both the cabinet and also the committee structure, and I've got absolutely no doubt in my mind that the committee structure is the best option. Not only is it the best option nationally, but it is also particularly for this borough council, because we've got a wide, diverse area. And the problem is having one member from one part of the borough being able to make decisions for the rest of the borough is an absolute nonsense. People in St Anne's don't know what Stadium wants. People in Singleton haven't got a clue what Lytham wants. So we've got to make sure that we have everybody represented on this council, that everybody has got a councillor who can speak up for their area. And at the present time with the cabinet system, we don't have that. And Councillor Armit also talks about the fact that only 5% of the electorate have spoken here. What he doesn't realise is that the previous 2 occasions that this council has gone out for consultation about which system to have, we have overwhelmingly had public support for the committee system. And basically, it was John Coombs that went against public opinion of this borough who dragged us into what was and what is a Labour Party model for trying to run local government. The fact is, local government should be everybody being involved, everybody having a councillor who can speak on their behalf. And it's quite amazing that Councillor Ahmed is speaking up for what is a Labour Party, a socialist sort of invention. I think the other thing which is quite clear also, since the cabinet system came in, how local government has plummeted in the popularity with people throughout the country. The number of people that vote for in elections now is derisory, and people now feel that it's very little they can do because there's a cabinet running it rather than their councillor. And the fact is that the only 2 speakers for tonight have been Councillor Eves and Councillor Ahmed. Neither of those have got any experience of the committee system. Councillor Mulholland's got experience of the committee system. I've got experience of the committee system. And I'm absolutely convinced, whether I'm in opposition, whether I'm in power, or what the situation is, that the committee system is by far the better system. And you've also got to look at our near neighbours, Lancashire County Council, where all parties have unanimously just voted to go back to a committee system. It's changing again, because the fact is, rather than have a system imposed upon local government by a socialist government, people are now given the option to change back. And the electorates are saying to people, for God's sake, change back. Let's make local government work again.
Thank you, Councillor Hayhurst. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I usually prepare quite well for full council meetings and decide whether I'm going to say something or not, but I think I must have got a different agenda from everybody else. To me, this report that we're looking at now isn't about whether we have a cabinet system or a committee system. I think everybody knows that. This debate that we're supposed to be having tonight is about whether we agree that should we have to have one, whether you want one or not, that this model is one that we can all work under. I was actually very, very pleased with the small group of us together from both sides of council, how we worked together and came to a compromise that we all agreed on. My feeling from the meetings that we did have is that this system that's being proposed is one that all members here tonight could work within. It might not be exactly what you would want, but it is something that we could all work together with, and I think that is something that we don't really have at the minute. I'm also a little bit disappointed in the fact that we're having the same old arguments coming up all the time. So I would ask everybody in here, both on the Conservative, on the Independents, from all the other parties, if when we get into having this debate about whether we should switch to a committee system or not, can we stick to things that are actually relevant to that? The cost of the referendum is not relevant to that. That is a given. That is going to happen. Whether you agree that it should have happened or not has got nothing at all to do with whether the committee system is better than the cabinet system or the other way around. So if you're going to use an argument about one system is going to be more expensive than the other, can you just leave the referendum out of it, because it's got nothing at all to do with it. That's really all I want to say. If we can have a proper, and obviously we are going to have a heated debate in the next few months leading up to the referendum, but if we can do it honestly and stick to the facts and stick to the merits of one system against the other, as opposed to the history of what a referendum could have cost or who brought it about or whether people have the right to call for it or not, just stick to the facts and let's have a proper debate, because that way we might end up with a system that is the best for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Oh,
sorry, I'll now say what I was actually going to say before. Just one point in the, if you look at paragraph 12, towards the bottom, about the second last paragraph in italics, which is just the one line saying that delegations to officers would be the same as in the current constitution. I'd just like to clarify that the method of delegation would be the same, but as part of, if there is a change in system, then I think we need to understand that the delegation wouldn't necessarily be exactly the same. The method of delegation would be the same. The fact that we do delegate down to committees and down to officers, that would stay the same, but the exact delegations or the amount of money involved before a decision is a full council or committee decision, that would change. So I think that's just slightly misleading there. It doesn't mean that there will be absolutely no change in the delegation rules. Okay. Thank you.
thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to speak to the merit of the report. I'm very conscious that as a Cabinet member I will be perceived to be biased in any event, and that causes me a difficulty. And I will be abstaining on the vote. But I do want to respond to just a couple of speakers, because it's really important that we don't have misinformation. It's easy to fall down that trap, and we've had that already tonight. There are members of the public in the audience. This will hopefully be webcast, so it's really important that, as Councillor Duffy's asked for facts, that we have facts and that any misinformation is corrected. I make mention of that in relation to Councillor Mulholland when he spoke about a portfolio holder decision. And I wanted to make sure that Council is aware and the public are aware that any decision of the Cabinet or a single member decision, portfolio holder decision, is able to be called in. We know that because we've seen it, and we've seen it in operation. We know that it takes 10 members to call in. It goes before a scrutiny committee. It's debated before that scrutiny committee. The committee make a decision whether or not they wish to have that decision overturned, and they can recommend that to either Cabinet or full council, and members will know that this has happened, and that you can take the view that that can mean no change, which of course it could mean the outcome could stay the same. But again, our experience has been that in many instances it has led to change. So I think it's important that those facts are available to people. Those procedures exist now under this system of governance. Also, Councillor Hayhurst said that the Lancashire County Council, they have voted to return to the committee system. That is not true. They have voted to request a report into alternative methods of governance, and that report is coming back to full council for them to take a decision on that. They will be looking at committees, a hybrid system, but as yet it's presented as if that decision has already been taken and it's gone ahead, fait accompli. That decision has not yet been taken, and I wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Does anybody else wish? Oh, Councillor Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak tonight till Councillor Hayhurst mentioned the Labour Party, so I thought I'd just add a little to that. 3 centuries ago, I quote, "It seemed just as we started to become effective, we were told to change." It's the same story. The Labour Party left this country virtually bankrupt, and the result is that we can't, together with all the other councils, have had to become more efficient. The fact that we have done so well, both in balancing the books, having a zero tax increase, improving the services that we give, was done under a cabinet system. It wasn't done under a committee system. I haven't seen a committee system, and it's the first thing I'd say to Councillor Hayhurst as well. I don't actually feel denuded in standing up for the people in my ward. I speak for them quite often. And I don't see why, when we're still in crisis in this country and we still have to be as efficient as we can, that we should suddenly just chuck everything over and go back to a system that may not be as effective. I'll leave you with two quotes. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, which I don't believe it's broken. And a camel is a horse designed by a committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Beckett.
I wasn't going to speak, Mr. Mayor, but I just thought a few things. I have served on this council under both systems, and believe it or not, the committee system is best. My opinion of a cabinet system is bullying, and it comes from the top, from government. When you get 7 people telling the rest of the council what to do and they've got to abide by it because they do, to me that is bullying, and that is all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beckett. Councillor Fazakerley. Can you stick to the agenda item, Councillor Fazakerley, because I do think we've wandered off a bit.
Well, you'll have to tell me, Mr. Mayor, if you think I'm wandering off. But I just have to say one or two things. And like everybody else in the room, I wasn't intending to speak tonight, but as Councillor Hayhurst has kind of goaded me by saying that nobody's spoken but him who experienced the old the old committee system, that Councillor Beckett has just put the knackers on that one. However, I just need...
The what? Mockers.
I'm sorry, is that a swear word?
I thought you said knackers.
She's got a cold, she said mockers.
I mean the mockers. I'm sorry.
Sounded like knackers.
Please, if we had a standards board, I'd be appearing before it now. I just want to make one point, really. And if you think I'm out of order in what I'm going to say, Mr. Mayor, I will bow to your position and stop. I don't feel particularly passionately about one system over the other. I think they both have their advantages and they both have their disadvantages. But what I feel very passionately about is the manipulation of our residents by a handful of people who have approached our residents at all sorts of opportunities, from farmers' markets to club days, making statements to them of a very prejudicial and biased nature and only presenting one side of a viewpoint. And that is why I will fight tooth and nail for the current system. And that's all I want to say, and thank you for letting me say that, and I apologise again for the K word.
Thank you. Oh, yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a point of order. What I would like to say, I promise you it is, Mr. Mayor. What I would like to say to that, Councillor Fazakerley, you've said that there's been manipulation and whatever phrase you word. My head's still full of knackers thinking you said that, so I do apologise. However, you said farmers' markets and you said different things like that. Those people didn't have their arms up behind their backs, and there were a number of businesses that accepted those forms on their counters with the free will that we have in the democratic world that we live in. We made a decision whether we wanted those on our counters, so there wasn't just a handful of residents that forced us. I think Councillor Mulholland had them on his. There are a number of businesses did. So please don't take it as residents being threatened. It was of their free will whether they signed it or not.
Thank you, Councillor Silverwood. Councillor Ford.
Unlike everybody else, I was determined to speak tonight. I've never known so many people take a backward step and then come forward. I just have some concerns about the model that's been presented to us. I'd like to have some clarity about the use of the word full, partway down paragraph 12, where it says each committee would have full delegated authority. I would like to see the word full removed. I think we need to be setting the parameters in which of the committees manage rather than saying full. I think it's still achieved later on in the paragraph anyway. I'd like some clarity about call-in and numbers, if that's possible. I know we're looking at a broad sweep tonight, but it is a concern I have. And I have some issues about the number of committees, and I think there are options there for combining quite a number of those committees, which would then bring down the cost. So if the committee system brings down the council's running costs, then surely that's good value for money for all residents. The assumption has been that it will be more expensive, or it's implied in the report that it could well be more expensive, and I actually think that fewer committees and combined committees would actually save back office costs, which I think is what we're about. Thank you.
Are you proposing an amendment, Councillor Ford?
No, well, I will do if necessary, but I'm just hoping that those issues can be raised and looked into. But I appreciate that we're only being given a broad sweep, so it may be that a future debate needs to be undertaken about the contents, but I'm just raising those as concerns I have. I'm happy with that a model's been put together, but I think it could be refined, and I'm not quite sure whether this is the venue for it or whether at a later debate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rhodes.
Well, before I start to speak, I would just like to pick a couple of points up. The last one from Councillor Ford, I think if the vote is successful, then all the points that you've made will be looked at by the group, and I'm certain that there will be more clarification at a later date. In relation to two points that Councillor Buckley made, one was about the call-in, and it's my understanding that even when you have a call-in and you're successful, it still has to go back to the portfolio holder to ask them to reconsider their decision. So I think that is the case. Also, on the point in relation to the county council vote, as a county councillor, I have voted to return to the committee system, but yes, we have asked for a paper, and the paper is looking at various types of governance in relation to the committee system. So that's my understanding as a county councillor, and I believe that there is a notice of motion next Thursday to look at that. So not wanting to disagree with you, but that's my understanding. Getting back to the debate, I am absolutely delighted to second this recommendation because, unlike Councillor Eaves, I'm hopeful that the public will vote in favour of change and thereby return democracy to Fylde. The system under consideration this evening is unlike the old committee system, which was complicated, ponderous and unwieldy. The cross-party group worked well together and looked to provide a system which will ensure that each member of the council will be equal and will be able to represent the people who elect them. And I'm sure that is what the people out there expect us to do, and I think they'll be very shocked to realise that that doesn't happen at the moment. Delegated powers will be given to committees, but there will also be a call-in device which will ensure that any items which may be in any way contentious can be referred to full council. It has to be right that the decision making flows from the council rather than, as now, lying with 7 people to make all the decisions. The system which is being recommended to you to replace the existing governance system is unlikely to have any greater cost implications. It will be far more democratic than the existing system and will empower all councillors rather than treating them like voting fodder, and I commend it to you.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes. Does anybody else wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 points. The first one relative to what Councillor Armitt said about we have had a poll and people could express their opinions in a vote and the cabinet system wasn't a major issue. I would dispute that. When I was campaigning, I asked people if they knew that we had a cabinet system, and at least 95% did not know that we had a cabinet system. And of the people I then told what we did have as a system run by the cabinet, I would say more than 80% were against it. So I mean, to say that it wasn't an issue, I think I probably got quite a lot of votes by saying that. And the second thing is we're making a lot about the cost of £58,000 or £54,000. I'd be grateful if our chief exec would clarify something for us on that. As I understand it, the European election, if we were not having a referendum, was going to cost us about £100,000, or it was going to cost £100,000. We've added something like £8,000 for the referendum, but because of European rules, or our government rules, we've actually got to split the cost down the middle, giving us £54,000 against the referendum, when in actual fact the incremental cost for the referendum is nothing like that. I'd be grateful if you could clarify that.
I'll let the monitoring officer who knows more than me about that answer it for you, Councillor Davis.
Thank you.
There are very particular rules regarding the sharing of election costs, and the way that the forthcoming election is judged is that there is the European election and then there is a separate election which is the referendum. Therefore we are running two very distinct elections that have different regulations and procedures, and the government is very prescribed in the way that it deals with the cost sharing arrangements.
I'm sorry, that doesn't answer the question I asked. Could you tell me, please, how much extra having the referendum will cost us by comparison with what we were going to be paying for the European election? Because I believe it's only an incremental about 8,000, and all right, I understand that we then have to divide it by 2 because of the rules, but in real terms it's only costing electors as a whole an extra 8,000, not 54,000. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We haven't broken the cost down in that way. There will be, because we're not required to break the cost down in that particular way. There are separate costs that are very distinct. There will be separate ballot papers, for example, that will require printing, separate postal vote applications that will need to be dealt with. So it's not quite as simple as just deducting an arbitrary amount off the election amount.
Councillor Duffy, did you want a point of clarification?
Yeah, I was just going to say that as far as I understood, and it might shock you that this sounds like I'm talking against somebody who wants to see a committee system, but as far as I understood, if it was just the European election on its own, then would Fylde Council not get reimbursed for that? Okay, so the cost to Fylde Council itself, if it was just the European election, would be a zero cost. Yeah, but because we're having to split it, then the cost of we will get reimbursed for the European election part of it, but we will have to bear the cost of the referendum ourselves. So in real terms, if the total cost, if it was an extra 8,000 to hold the referendum at the same time as the European elections, then that's an extra £8,000, yeah, but the real cost to Fylde Council will be £54,000, whereas it would have been zero before. And whether that, I mean, as I said before, that's got nothing to do with whether one system's better than the other, and it's a given we have to do that. Whether you think it's that's a price that's worth paying to have democracy, then that's up to you to decide yourselves.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. I think that's cleared that matter up. Thank you. Councillor Eaves, do you want to sum up?
I'd like to sum up quite briefly, actually, Mr. Mayor, to say I support Councillor Duffy in what he actually said, and that is some of the debate tonight, whilst it's been interesting, has been totally irrelevant. The matter before you tonight is whether to adopt the model as a principle that is put before you in the order papers tonight. It isn't, every I hasn't been dotted and every T hasn't been crossed. The devil is in the detail. The detail will come after the 22nd of May, if it's a yes vote, whereby this council will have to put the flesh on the bones for that model ready for May of 2015. It is quite simply to vote on whether we accept this model tonight as a benchmark of moving forward. Some of the debate has been irrelevant, though interesting, but I urge the council to come to vote with regards to this matter on the table tonight in order to clear up whether we're going to accept this model or not. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. So, is everybody clear? We're moving to the vote. I think we can do this by a show of hands. Is it all those in favour?
So it was carried towards you?
Yeah.
Do you want to ask if there's any?
Yeah. Anyone against?
It's carried.
And abstentions? Thank you. So that is clearly carried. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your attendance and a quite civilised meeting. Thank you.